Dear colleagues, dear participants, thank you so much for joining us today. As announced, this event will be in English, but everybody will have the opportunity to speak his own language, especially for the questions and answers session. It's not very often that we have the opportunity to organize an event on this scale, that's to say, where all the communities in Belgium are represented. I'm delighted to welcome you here today, already to our fifth joint event, which is dedicated to the system-level indicators in Belgium and in Europe. The focus will be on two domains analyzed in this publication: advancing equity and reducing early leaving from education and training. This event is organized by the 3 Eurydice national units, one for each community in Belgium, as part of the Eurydice network. This creates an ideal opportunity to compare the different systems and learn from best practices in our country and in Europe. The system-level indicators are one of the annual Eurydice publications. They focus on key education policies and structures that can contribute to achieving EU-level targets and policy objectives. They provide valuable insights into 4 key topics: education policies on early childhood education and care, early school leaving, higher education, and equity in both school and higher education. These indicators serve as an essential data source for the European Commission's annual Education and Training Monitor, which offers an in-depth analysis of the development of education and training systems across the European Union, offering valuable insights into their development. The first part of our meeting will concentrate on the report in general, and then especially on how to use our new visualization tool and how to navigate into it on the web. This will be explained by an analyst from the European Commission. Then 2 other analysts will focus each on a specific domain, as said earlier, on advancing equity and on reducing early leaving from education and training. Thank you once again to all participants and speakers. I'm looking forward to the discussion. But just a kind reminder, if you wish to ask questions, you can post them in the chat during or after the presentation, or ask them directly during our question and answer session after the presentations, and this in your own language. As already stated in the invitation, this event will be recorded and the link will be at disposal to streamline it after the event. And now let's begin with the conference in itself. This morning, we are very glad to have the opportunity to listen to 3 speakers who will present the Eurydice report, System-Level Indicators in Europe. Let me first thank you all, as well as the Commission, especially for your work, your collaboration, and of course for today's presentation. It's very important for us to have you here with us, because we then can work together for the visibility of this publication, as well as show the high quality of this work and the relevance of the different topics analyzed. Theodora, our first speaker, is an education policy analyst from the European Commission at the executive agency at the Eurydice unit, and she is here with us. She is a specialist in education, analyzing and comparing data. Sorry, could you please mute your microphone? Sorry. So I was speaking about Theodora. She's a specialist in education, analyzing and comparing data from the different Eurydice units all over Europe, and writing reports at all levels of education and on different themes. Theodora has been working for Eurydice since 2006 on a range of thematic reports, including more recently equity in school education and learning for sustainability. She is currently involved in the forthcoming report on addressing underachievement in basic skills. Theodora also coordinates the Eurydice project on the annual update of the system-level indicators. For the first time, the 2024 update of our system-level indicators take the form of an interactive web tool, allowing users to easily navigate and visualize the collected data. With this user-friendly interface, you will gain a deeper understanding of education systems across Europe. Theodora will explain this to us. Theodora, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Bernadette, for this presentation, for the kind words. Thank you, in fact, to the 3 Belgian Eurydice national units for organizing this event and for giving us the opportunity to present to you the 2024 update of the system-level indicators that were previously known as structural indicators for monitoring education and training systems in Europe. I'll start by sharing the presentation. I hope you see everything. You see the slide?
Thank you very much.
Great. Okay, so as Bernadette said, we will start with a general introduction to this project, to its objectives and its evolution through the years before we arrive to the 2024 update that we just released, in fact, on 28th of November, and focusing together with my colleagues Sogol Noorani and Manos Sigalas on 2 of the 4 policy domains that we are featuring this year. So I will start first by saying that the project on the system-level indicators is in fact a project where we select a limited number of indicators, up to 10, per policy area, which is directly linked to EU-level agreed targets or other objectives. And we publish every year since 2015 already these indicators. They cover 38 European education systems, so much larger scope than the member states of the European Union. The focus of the system-level indicators is on key education policies and structures that research literature has shown that could contribute to achieving EU-level targets and policy objectives. This project was started on the request of the European Commission, and indeed, every year our system-level indicators provide essential data for the European Commission's annual education and training monitor. Our data, which is used in the monitor, but also we have separate publications, is complementary to Eurostat and PISA or other survey data. And we present with those indicators variations across European education systems in a comparative perspective, which allows not only policymakers, we believe, but also researchers or practitioners in the field of education, as well as other stakeholders, have a snapshot of developments across Europe in important areas that Bernadette also already mentioned, areas like early childhood education and care, early leaving from education and training, equity in school and higher education, and others. So here I have used the list of EU-level targets in education and training that has been published in the most recent Education and Training Monitor. Just to give an example how we link our system-level indicators to existing targets. You see the first target is on participation of children between age 3 and the starting age of compulsory primary education in early childhood education and care. So this is a target agreed at European level. This target is measured through Eurostat data on an annual basis. And what we do on our side, we collect information about policies across education systems that facilitate the increase of participation of children in early childhood education and care. I should say that here you will see also targets related to VET. That's not a domain in which we work, as you very well know. CEDEFOP is the European agency that specializes on vocational education and training. And for the moment, we still don't have system-level indicators on adult learning, although we do work occasionally on this topic also. For the rest, we do collect information for all policy areas as part of the project on system-level indicators. And I should say also as part of our work on thematic reports, the big reports that we produce regularly. Now, before moving to this year's update, I just wanted to spend a minute on the 2023 edition of the structural indicators, which were called structural indicators then, but as I say now, we have changed the title. So last year we had 7 policy areas that were covered by the system level indicators. That means more than 45 key indicators. So last year we also added indicators on key competences, on teachers, very importantly, because that was the focus of the education and training monitor last year. And we also had, in addition, indicators on digital competence. 2023 was the last year when we published actually standalone reports for each of those policy areas. And you could see those if you follow the link at the end of this slide. Now, moving to this year's update, we have 4 policy areas. You see them once again here mentioned: early childhood education and care, early leaving from education and training, equity in school and higher education, and higher education. What is indeed, and it was already mentioned in the introduction, what's indeed different this year is that we have completely moved to online publication using Power BI. So we have 4 Power BI reports on our website. It's an interactive tool. My colleagues will show you in detail how it works for their policy areas. But generally, it allows the users really to decide on their own the type of data that is displayed and also the data that they would, for instance, download themselves and do further analysis on. And now, very briefly about the 2 policy areas that we're not going to look into detail at today. So you have here the list of indicators, and then you have the link to the visualization tool. All this relates to the 2024 update. So as you see, for early childhood education and care, we have indicators that really focus on access, but also on quality of early childhood education and care. And then for higher education, we have taken a slightly different approach. We have 2 composite indicators. Both of them relate again to equity and the social dimension in higher education. You see the first composite indicator on tackling gender equality issues. It consists itself of 4 sub-indicators that you also see on the screen. And depending on the performance of each education system across these 4 indicators, there is a color attributed. And then that's maybe perhaps some of you know the system of stock-taking indicators that is used, scorecard indicators that is used as part of the Bologna process monitoring And we also use it in this case. So as I said, first composite indicator on tackling gender equality issues, and the second one is on basically recognition of prior learning as admission criteria, and also you see other measures related to improving access and participation of underrepresented groups. I think I'm stopping here now, and Sogo will take over talking about an area that she's very familiar with, and she's the one who is updating our indicators on early leaving from education and training already for quite some time. So unless the organizers would like here also to have a word before Sogo starts her presentation. You're muted, Sane.
I'm so sorry. Apologies for being muted. Thank you so much for your presentation, Theodora. I just wanted to intervene quickly to see if there is anyone who might have questions for you specifically at this point. I don't see any hands raised, so I don't think so. It seems there are no questions. I also just want to say to the participants, if you do have a question, no matter how minor, you can also just put it in the chat and we will read it to the presenters. But as it is still very quiet, thank you so much, Theodora, for the presentation. And yeah, I give the floor now to Sogol for her own. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Before I start, I wanted to quickly maybe ask Theodora, since you had the presentation open and you have the latest version, if you could keep sharing your slide also for Manos, for both of us, and then we take over when we switch to the web presentation of the indicators. That would be great. Thank you very much. There's actually not so much to show on the PowerPoint, but like this, you have it in front of you. I will be presenting in a little bit more detail this area of early leaving from education and training. And in preparing this presentation, I thought a little bit, I reflected a little bit back how it actually started, and I thought maybe it would be interesting also to share this a little bit with you. As Theodora said, we started in 2015 producing the structural indicators, or now system level indicators, and the basis for the indicators on early leaving from education and training were, it was a report, a comprehensive comparative report that you already see published in 2014 on tackling early leaving from education and training in Europe. So we had a big comprehensive report, and from that report we started reflecting and extracting basically the key indicators that together with the Commission we decided would be worth highlighting, and in order to present what are some of the main actions that can be taken to reduce the share of early leavers, and also to monitor the developments in these policy areas over time. So that was a little bit how it started. Maybe also interesting, because Theodora mentioned the EU level targets before. At the time when we started this work, the EU level target that member states had agreed on, which is measured based on Eurostat data and based on the definition of young people aged between 18 and 24 who have left education and training without completing upper secondary education. So this target was to reduce the rate to below 10% by 2020. And this target was actually reached also by 2020, despite some variations across member states. But so a new target was then set, which was to reduce the share of early leavers to below 9% by 2030. And so this is basically the target that is the current EU policy context in which we find ourselves in. And probably you all know, but in Belgium, basically the early school living rate is, Belgium is performing relatively well on this indicator with a rate that has been reduced actually from 11% in 2013 to now 6.2% in 2023. So there has been a lot of progress there when it comes to Belgium, but when looking at some breakdowns, there are some variations. For example, when you compare the early school living rate for the native-born population, which is around 5.8% now, as opposed to the non-EU-born young population with the early school living rate of 10.5%. So this is just a little bit of contextual and statistical information to describe the context. So, as I said, we tried with the system level indicators on early leaving from education and training to cover some of the main areas that are critical for this topic. So we used to have, and we still have, an indicator addressing data collection related to early leaving. We also cover the area of preventing early leaving from education and training. So acting before something happens, before students start to become absent and declining in their school performance. We try to cover intervention measures, so really providing direct support to those students who are effectively already struggling and who are at risk of early leaving. Then there's the compensation measures that we also used to cover. So what can be done for those students who have left the education and training system early? So how can we support them to come back and obtain an upper secondary qualification? And also the area of teacher training. So these are the big sort of overall areas that we traditionally covered, but maybe also you're surely, you are experts and maybe aware, but like the topic of early leaving from education and training is very large, very comprehensive. So under each of these like bigger areas that I mentioned, there are many different aspects that can be considered, many different policy angles that can be analyzed. And something that happened over time was that by looking at these bigger areas, we actually saw that more and more countries cover, broadly speaking, these areas, which is, of course, also a very positive thing. And it probably also goes hand in hand with the fact that the EU level target was being reached, or progress was being made on reaching the target. But it also signaled or showed a little bit that maybe it's good to look a little bit in more detail and look at very specific aspects to get some more detailed information or shed light on some different specific aspects in order to have a more informative view. So this is why over the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years, together with the European Commission, we started to slightly modify the ELET indicators and to investigate other specific aspects that are of particular interest. So this brings me finally to this year's set of indicators. And here is maybe where I could switch to the web page. I will just share my screen. I hope you can all see this. Yeah.
Yes.
So basically, this is when you follow the link, which was on the second page of the it's in the PowerPoint presentation. When you follow the link, you basically arrive to this web page, which presents the system level indicators on early leaving from education and training. You get a short introduction, which highlights the current EU level target, as I just mentioned. It mentions that we are still covering top level policies and measures in 38 education systems, as Theodora said, and these particular indicators focus on school education, so primary and lower and upper secondary education. So then you scroll a little bit further down and you arrive at the first indicator, which we visualized with the help of Power BI. So this one is on top-level policies on early warning systems to prevent early leaving from education and training. So the main question that we asked the members of the EURDC network here was whether countries promote the development of systematic data collections that allow monitoring factors that are commonly related to early leaving from education and training, such as learners' school attendance or absence, low overall grades, things like grade repetition, social emotional issues or problematic behavior maybe, and also other potentially critical elements such as learners' sense of well-being and their sense of belonging in school, experiences of bullying, discrimination, etc. So as you can see then, basically this early warning systems, this would be the blue category. And if you click on it, you basically see here the countries that indicated, and they're also listed here, the countries that indicated having such a comprehensive data collection system, which is usually a informatics, like an how shall I say, an online database that is accessible and usable for all levels of education authorities, also starting with schools, then local education authorities, up to top-level education authorities, so that all actors have the chance to see what is the current situation, what are current needs, what are interventions that are being provided, and in which direction is the situation going. Apart from countries indicating having such early warning systems, there were also 10, then here you see the number of the countries who indicated having not maybe early warning system as such, but monitoring certain ELED risk factors through their school guidance and counseling services. So this is another way to monitor the current situation with regard to early leaving and the needs and maybe the need for support. And another category of countries were the ones that indicated that they do monitor ELED risk factors by, well, the risk factor that they're monitoring mainly is to monitor student school absence. And other monitoring actions or in general measures, of course, may also be taken, but this would then probably be more at school level. There's not such a comprehensive top-level system in place. So yeah, as you see, you can click on these different items. You can also click on the different pieces of the pie and obtain the same information, or you also click on certain countries and get the category for the time being. There is not more information that we provide, but simply the category that the countries indicated for themselves. Then if we go further down, we come to the next indicator, which is on policies on individual education plans. And by individual education plans, we mean comprehensive plans that outline the sort of teaching approaches, adaptations, also the support measures that should need to be provided to learners who have specific educational support needs. These individual education plans are traditionally provided to learners with special educational needs or disabilities, but it has been shown that having such plans in place for students with other support needs, or any student for that matter that is in need of educational support, can contribute to more inclusive education that effectively addresses everybody's needs. So our question here was which learners are targeted in top-level policies on individual education plans. And as you can see here, these are the number of education systems. The majority of them, so over 30, indicated that learners with special educational needs and disabilities are the main target group for individual education plans. And if you hover over the bar, you can see also the list of countries that said that these are the targeted students. The second most frequently targeted students are learners from refugee or migrant backgrounds. Voilà, here they are, and the countries that target those specifically with individual education plans. Same number of education systems also indicated other learners, and by other learners were frequently meant students also who have a lack of knowledge in the language of instruction, for example, students who for health reasons have problems attending school or following school as it should be, and also gifted students were mentioned in this category by several countries. The category all learners, which we were maybe hoping to see a bit more widely reported, was mentioned by 10 education systems. So 10 education system highlighted that all learners can, in theory and in practice, benefit from individual education plans, followed by learners from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds, and a couple of countries saying they have no policy on individual education plans. However, here, for example, Denmark indicated that this is a matter of local autonomy, so there's no top-level policy on this, but at a local level, this might still be happening. Then going a bit further down, you get to the next indicator, always with a little sort of introduction of what we actually, what we're talking about. This is about learners' access to multidisciplinary support teams. And by these teams, we mean teams of professionals, such as teachers specialized in dealing with language or learning difficulties, teachers specialized in special needs or inclusive education, psychologists, counselors, medical professionals, education career guidance specialists, and so on and so forth. Who would be able to work as a team and in that sense provide a coordinated response. So as opposed to fragmented and maybe punctual and maybe contradictory work with individual students, these professionals will work as a team together to provide a coordinated and holistic response to the complex needs that students at risk of early leaving sometimes have. And of course, the work of these teams would also happen in close collaboration with the schools and teachers and parents and so on. So here may be interesting to note that last year we were inquiring about policies on these support teams, but for this year, and we also inquired which professionals would be part of these teams, but for this year the Commission colleagues we work with asked us to not only talk about policies on these teams, but also try to investigate more about learners' access to these teams. This is, of course, a little bit more difficult for us and our network, as we're not collecting information on policy implementation. But so what we tried to do was to see whether top-level education authorities monitor and evaluate learners' access to these multidisciplinary support teams, which would give them an indication of whether access can be ensured or maybe not in as much as it is needed. So here, basically, this is a rather straightforward map. You can see that basically 17 education systems said, yes, we do monitor and evaluate learners' access to multidisciplinary support teams. And mainly the way that they indicated doing so is through school evaluations and inspections, so mainly through external school evaluations, and for some it was also mentioned as a criteria for internal school evaluations. Here's again the list of the countries, indicating yes, and then a little bit more education systems saying that no, this is not part of our regular monitoring and evaluation processes. Voila. And then the final indicator is about education and career guidance in schools. So here, obviously, giving guidance to students about their educational prospects, different educational pathways, and also career options is something that has been shown to have a positive impact on their chance of staying in school and engaging more positively with education. So that's why we asked basically whether education and career guidance is promoted through the compulsory curriculum, either through a separate subject or as a cross-curricular topic or integrated in other subjects and so on. Whether B, it is promoted through internal or external school guidance services, so education career guidance services, and or whether C, this is promoted through work placements or job shadowing. And something we did also was to distinguish between primary level and secondary level, because doing this obviously at an early stage is very beneficial, especially before sort of key transition points, like before starting secondary education, for example. And so we wanted to see how's the situation and also what's the difference between the education levels. So as you can see, at primary level, there are 15 education systems saying that there is no policy on education and career guidance at top level. 9 countries indicated B, that this is something promoted through internal or external guidance services. Again, here you have the list of the countries. And 7 indicated that it's A and B, so promoted through the compulsory curriculum and through guidance services. And if you click on secondary level, you immediately see that the situation is a little bit different. So here you have a majority of countries indicating A plus B plus C, so through the curriculum, through guidance services, and through work placements or job shadowing. You have 7 countries indicating A and B, and 7 countries saying that this is mainly done by internal external guidance services. Maybe also just to mention, like in the corner, you have country-specific notes, which give you a little bit more detail or specifications if something specific relates to a specific country. So I'm a little bit aware that I'm taking too much time. I'm going to stop here, but hopefully that showed you a little bit how this tool works and what it contains. I want to quickly just mention for the next year, we just started the data collection. And so together again with the European Commission, we discussed what data we will collect for next year, and it was decided, or we were asked basically that we update the indicator on early warning systems as something which is of interest, a lot of interest. We will update the indicator on individual education plans. We were asked to bring back an indicator from last year, which was on teacher competences to address early leaving from education and training, and competences that are promoted either through teacher education, initial teacher education, or continuing professional development. And we will have 2 new indicators. So here we are testing a little bit new waters. One of them is on policies and measures to address absenteeism. So how to deal with students who start being absent. What do countries do in order to reach these young people and encourage them to not be absent. And the last one is on monitoring the non-enrolled population and reaching out to them. So again, we're going to this topic of students who have already left education training early, what is being done at the policy level to encourage them to come back to education and complete upper secondary. So I will stop here. I'm sorry I took a bit long, and I hope it's okay to hand over now to my colleague Manos, or to the organizers.
Thank you. Thank you again, Sogol, for your presentation. Again, I'm looking in the chat and if anyone's raised their hands to see if anyone has questions. I don't see anything again, which is great, which means everything is very clear. I also want to say that I've heard from a couple of people that there are some issues with the chat, that not everyone can enter it and ask their questions. I cannot solve it from this end because when I look at my settings, everything has been turned and clicked to green. So if anyone has a pressing issue, please feel free to raise your hand, ask the question directly, or even send me an email. I will see them come in and I will transfer either into the chat or I will direct it at one of you guys. Just a small practical information. And then I think we still have Manos who has to make his last presentation. And Manos is, just like Sogol, of course, a policy analyst at the Eurydice unit for quite some time. And his main field is equity in school and also higher education, if I am not wrong, which is also what he'll be presenting on. He worked before as a political scientist in research organizations and in universities in different countries in Europe and outside of Europe, in Canada. So I think in terms of a presenter or a research analyst, to be working for Eurydice and to be presenting for us today is really great. Thank you so much. I see that the presentation, or at least the web tool, is ready to be casted to everyone. So I'm going to silence myself, mute myself, and give the floor to Manos. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sana, very much. I don't know if before I go to the web tool, Teodora can put back the presentation, the slides that we had before.
Sure, yeah.
Great. So I'll stop. Yeah, I'll stop sharing. Did you put them again back, Teodora? So I can't see it. I don't know if anyone else can see it.
No, we don't.
I can't see it right here exactly.
All right, let me try to do it then. I think I have it also open. What about now? Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. All right. And if I click on this, do you see the full screen?
Yes, perfect.
Even better. So I'm not going to say very much. I think we're running out of time, and I'd like to offer the opportunity for some questions and discussion. Regarding equity, I suppose it's a bit younger set of indicators compared to ELED and early childhood education care. It came along after the first equity publication, Eurydice publication, was prepared in 2020. So the Commission showed an interest, had already shown an interest in this topic, and they asked us to present also a number of system-level indicators. The latest, the ones that have been recently published online, are 6. And they relate both to school and higher education, and they don't present whether there are any equity problems. We take this for granted. Instead, they show to what extent member states or members of the Eurydice network do something about it. So our indicators focus on support measures, to a very large extent, financial and non-financial support measures, perhaps with one exception that I'll show in the next slide. So half of the indicators, the 3, relate to support measures in school education. So as you can see here, we've asked them whether there's any additional funding for schools that enroll large numbers of the disadvantaged students, and also about the source of the funding. Where does it come from national sources or EU funding? We asked whether there's any financial support for teachers who work in schools with a large number of disadvantaged students, because as you know, it's very important to keep or make the profession attractive and help teachers who work in more challenging environments. Another form of support focuses on teachers again, this time in terms of the incentives to stay in a school with disadvantaged students, which was expressed in terms of providing better working conditions or giving the opportunity for a preferential assignment in the next school, or even a faster career progression. The other 3 indicators relate to higher education, and this is the only non-support indicator that we had. Namely, we asked the members whether the national authorities linked funding towards higher education institutions with any equity targets. So we ask whether, you know, the funding depends on widening access to students with certain characteristics who are underrepresented, the minorities, refugees, lower socioeconomic status students, or whether it relates, there's a target relating to the completion of studies. And I'll show you briefly the results a bit later. And the other two indicators relate to financial support again, whether top-level authorities, so usually national authorities, provide support, financial support for student accommodation or student meals and transport, public transport, and also whether they provide any funding towards the higher education institutions to train the staff on matters related to diversity and inclusion. This is the link which Teodora can perhaps upload it on the chat for the equity indicators to see them online. Then I'll stop sharing to go straight to the publication. If you give me a second, the online publication. And that should be it. Do you see the website? The Eurydice website, if someone can tell me?
Yes.
Yes,
Perfect. Excellent, thank you. So the structure is very much the same throughout all areas of indicators. So ELET was it's the same, follows the same as ELET, for example, that Sagola just presented. I think it's this kind of tool that we just launched is perhaps more interactive in the sense that, as Sagola has shown, you know, you can click on the country and it tells you, let me see, yep. For example, Finland, you see that in Finland you have additional funding for schools enrolling disadvantaged students that comes from the national budget, okay? And if we go to Belgium, you see here for the French community, it comes from both sources. For the Flemish community, it comes mainly from the national budget. And if you want to have an overall picture, you see here that 18 education systems, it comes from the national budget, as you can see, so for the vast majority of the countries. And for 10 countries, it comes from both national and European sources, and so on and so forth. Again, another way is perhaps to go to this list here and choose the country. So let's say the German-speaking community. Sorry, it doesn't look very nice on the map if you zoom in. That's unfortunately the default option on Power BI. So for smaller countries, it's a bit uglier, the setting. Whereas, you know, bigger countries, more straightforward. Still, you know, for the German-speaking community, you see the funding comes from mainly from the national, or in this case, the regional budget. Right. So yes, where does the additional funding come from, and how many countries have it? So 6 countries do not have any additional funding for schools enrolling disadvantaged students. What about teachers? Is again, in 21 cases, 21 education systems, there are no financial support measures for teachers working in such schools, whereas for 12, you have at least an additional allowance. For 4 education systems, you have an increased basic salary, and just one, combines both. And if you can see, yes, it's Romania, combines both an increased basic salary and additional allowance. Just feel free to stop me if anyone has a question. Otherwise, I'll go ahead with the third indicator. Slightly more complicated in the sense that we have 3 parameters here: better working conditions, faster career progression, preferential next assignment. So it's a bit more colorful, but still you see 19 education systems opt for better working condition, which usually means providing teachers with some assistance or special support staff that can help out in their duties in the classroom. Often, not always the case, but often this is the kind of what the education systems mean by provision of better working conditions. Then going to higher education, as said, it has to, I promise I'll get back to it, it has to be linking of funding, university funding to the presence of any equity targets. Maybe you will not be surprised to see that in the vast majority of countries, there's no such link. Okay, so higher education institution funding is independent of any equity targets. In Belgium, only Flanders has something, namely it's linked to the study completion and another equity target. And if I remember correctly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it had to do something about international students and the mobility of international students. Yes. What about financial support for student accommodation or student meals and transport? That's a really colorful map, as you can see, because we have again a combination of different possibilities. However, most of them, at least more than half of the education systems, they provide subsidies both for accommodation and meals and public transport for all types of higher education institutions. And here you see the breakdown, so slightly different. In 4 countries, there's just subsidies for public transports and nothing about food or accommodation. And finally, yes, the list, the ranking changes here depending on how you click on the arrow. So what about financial support to higher education systems, about training? Simple a dichotomous variable here. Is the financial support or not? For most, for 27 education systems, there is no financial support for training staff on matters related to equity and inclusion. If you want, and I think this can be really useful, especially for researchers of any sort, you can download the data here. Open data, you can download and conduct your own research. And that goes for every set of structure and system level indicators. And here we included also related publications that you can download if you're interested. So in this case, we have about an older report on equity in higher education, school education, and the structure indicators of last year. And I think I don't need to share anymore. Maybe a few words about the forthcoming data collection, which will start well, actually has started. The indicators, the choice of indicators was largely has changed. The number has stayed the same. It's again 6 indicators. We'll collect data about 6 indicators on only on school education this time, not in higher education. And this is because of a request from the European Commission. They wanted a different type of indicators this year. So basically we had no choice. We said, okay, we'll collect data, a different set of data. But again, the good news perhaps for those who contribute to this data collection is that the indicators are not new. They've been presented from us before. And so you have already given data for such indicators before. And this year they relate to grade repetition, they relate to educational segregation in schools, ability grouping, the year of if there's tracking in your education system or not, the year that it starts, and also if it's possible to move from one track to another. So the questions are familiar, perhaps slightly adapted to be up to date, and the number of indicators is the same, but the content compared to the 2024 is different to reflect the priorities of the European Commission. So I will stop here and I'll give the floor to the organizers to perhaps see if there are any questions or not. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Manos, for your presentation. Are there any questions on equity in school and higher education? I don't see any hands raised. Okay. Well, before we conclude, I have a small request for you. We have prepared a little questionnaire to gather your feedback on today's event. I will share the link in the group chat. I don't know if everybody sees it. If somebody has a problem with accessing the link, I will also send the link by email, but you can already take a look. Let me just share my screen with you because it's not such a big problem, but there's a possibility not to change the language of the question, but to change the general language of the form. I will just quickly share my screen. So this is our form. You see that here it says Jetzt starten, das ist Deutsch, but here you can change the language, and you can choose your own language to fill out the form. We would be very grateful for you if you do it. It will give us input for future events. I want to thank you, of course, for all your participation. I hope we sparked your interest in the work and activities of Eurydice. As said already in the group chat, the presentation will be made available to you. And of course, a very special thank you goes to the expert analysts from Eurydice, Theodora, Sobol, and Manos. Thank you very much for your willingness to share your insights with all of us and the work that has been done concerning the system level indicators. We greatly appreciated the excellent collaboration with you in preparing for this event. So thank you very much. And thank you all of you. I look forward to receiving your feedback through the evaluation form. Unless my colleagues Bernadette or Sana still want to add something.
Not really, just to thank you all participants, but also the three speakers from the Commission. Thank you very much for your collaboration. I don't know, Sana, if you want to add something.
No, I think Neil and you have said it all. Thank you so much for the presentations. Thank you so much for the collaboration. And also thank you so much to everyone who's been here, who's joined this meeting from all the three communities. I really hope that since a lot of you have probably worked on the indicators, that this gives you kind of a good overview of what are we doing with all of this work? Why does the Commission need all of this data? I know that sometimes it's not very clear, so I really hope for our participants that this gives it a little bit more body and yeah, that we can work really well on the next ones as well.
Yeah.
Thank you from us as well, and we'll be happy to hear from you if you have additional questions, if you have any remarks on our new web tool. We're very much conscious that among us today are a lot of experts who've been working hard together with us to reach this result. So thank you, and we look forward to the 2025 edition of the system level indicators. Thank you.
Thank you. We wish you all a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
To you. Thanks a lot
Bye.
for organizing.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.